Most clinicians get more extensive training in individual psychotherapy and have much more experience with individual psychotherapy than, say, partnership therapy or family therapy, or in this case, group psychotherapy. So I think my challenge would be, can you leave your individual interventions in your pocket in some way? So there's so many wonderful individual interventions that we probably all know and use, even if, just to use some cliches, you could say, go on, can you say more? Have you experienced like anything like this before? You might make a empathetic attunement. That sounds hard, or what a dilemma, or so sad. While you'll have these with you as a group leader, ideally, could you have other group members say the things that you would like to say? Right? The story of the founding of group psychotherapy in the United States is that Joseph Pratt was giving lectures, health lectures in Boston. And at one point, the members of the lecture series said, would you please be quiet? We get a lot more benefit from hearing one another talk than we do from listening to you. And to give him his credit, he really took that and really was one of the founding figures in group psychotherapy with this idea that people can benefit greatly from sharing experiences, sharing differences, sharing stories, sharing solutions, sharing feelings. So in the analytic tradition, the cliche of what you do as a therapist is just help people talk. That will be, as beginning analysts, that's often the recommendation that people receive. So, of course, it's more complex than this. But in terms of modifying that kind of simple instruction to group, I would phrase it this way. Can you help your members talk? So this may come in a variety of ways. This could become giving prompts, what's on people's mind. The group may have a topic that would be prompt. There may be some homework, or there may be some kind of check-in or introductory question. So what is it that you can do in your groups that will help people begin to talk? Oftentimes, this can be even silence, that people will say something and often look at the leader. And it's a fine line here of you don't want to be dismissive. So you might look at the person and you might use silence to see if other people will come in. So this is the second point. Once you've helping them learn to talk in the group, using whatever techniques that you may have to use in different groups will need a different style of leadership to help them talk. The next challenge is to help them talk to one another, right? So you can give prompts like, oh, this reminds me of what Pat was saying a few weeks ago. Or that would be asking a specific member, which often goes well, but sometimes you don't know everybody's history, and you could ask something more general. Can anyone relate to this? Does this remind anyone of a period or a person in their life in some way? Would you be willing to talk with us about that, or share some of this with us? And then I think of Dr. Elizabeth Olsen, who I've been able to co-lead groups with for 20 years. And given your personality, you'll have different things that will help members talk to one another. But she has trained the group that when there's a silence, she may sit with it, but sometimes she'll say, next thoughts? And it's amazing how well the group responds to that. This is over years with her typically, and that they know this is an invitation and a subtle demand for them to start engaging with one another in some way. Some of my interventions that are somewhat playful, that come from my personality, is sometimes someone will say something and I'll look to another group member or maybe the other side of the group and pull out my ear, or I'll kind of look at someone and say, knowing that what this other person said somehow relates to what this person might be thinking or feeling in that moment in some way. So if the first is to help them talk and the second is to help them talk to one another, the third would be, can you help them talk about new things? Group is like a fish. It needs to keep moving forward in order to breathe, in order to grow, in order to live. So groups can get kind of in a static way of just rehashing the same thoughts. So is there a way to call on a member may have a different idea? Could you present a different idea about this? Could you say, oh, isn't this a rerun? I think I watched this discussion last week in group. That's a little more provocative, a little more challenging of the group. But there's always kind of more connections, more memories, more reactions among the group members, and is often getting discussed. And can we find ways to kind of mine those and have those come forward in some way? So this can be thought about as, you're doing didactic work in group. Oh, Pat, what did you think of what Chris said in some way? Or you could say, who relates to this or who sees this differently in some way. So really you're directing the group to connect with each other more than you're giving concrete feedback. And with this deep belief that they may learn more and better be able to integrate and accept something from their peers than the leader. Of course, this isn't true for everyone. So some other ideas beyond working with these dyadic, getting two people to talk to each other, and then you can bring in a third person, would be to kind of try to talk to a subgroup in some way. I'm thinking of doing court-ordered therapy groups, which I've did for many, many years, and saying, oh, it seems like there's a spectrum here. Some people feel like this is just going to be a waste of time, and some people feel like they might get a benefit out of it. Now, who's in which group? Or knowing who's in the group. Why do you think this is just a complete waste of time? Okay, what's the counterpoint here? Why do you think this may somehow be helpful in some way? And then you could also think about asking the group as its own unique organism, a group as a whole intervention. Sometimes you may say, how are we doing today? Are we talking about the things that are important for us to talk about in some way? Right? Are there other things that are left unfinished from our previous groups or from earlier in this group? So these are just kind of invitations to the entire group. Or you could kind of comment or ask about what you're seeing as the kind of flavor, emotion, dynamics of the group. It seems like we're telling a lot of stories about our past, but we're really not connecting with one another. Am I seeing this correctly in some way? I've become less and less provocative as a leader over my years of work, but I remember being more provocative and saying things like, this group seems emotionally constipated today. And I think I probably adapted that from Lou Ormont or other group leaders. Or saying, or I love this from Dr. Olson, when groups wouldn't be working hard. Sometimes she'd just cross her arms or look bored, or even when people wore a watch before cell phones would look at her watch and they'd say, hey, what's going on? And she'd say, I don't know, I'm a little bored. How about the rest of you? If, nothing was happening in the group in some way. You can also communicate in other ways of, maybe sitting up straight, leaning in, nodding your head, smiling, crying, being emotionally attuned. And You could summarize the group today is talking about many sad things. The group today is talking about losses or unfulfilled dreams or hopes for the future. And this kind of helps them reflect on what's going on in the process and potentially take that process a little deeper and integrate it more, and maybe even potentially inviting members who haven't said as much to come into that. If we say, like, oh, we're talking about hopes and desires for the future, but Tom, you've been quiet. What do you think of this topic? Or I would imagine some people in this group would be curious what your hopes and desires are for the future in some way. So I think of group psychotherapy in my training as the vast majority of what I say is probably from my experiences, mainly as a group member, that I've seen interventions from being a group member and being in training experiences and, reading case studies that really stick with me, as this seems like this could be very, very helpful. It may not exactly fit my personality or exactly the groups I was leading at that time, and I may have to adapt it at some point. But I think of group interventions as we have a series of kind of note cards that we can go through and that can be on our mind. And we might say the ones like, does anyone relate to this? What do you think Pat's feeling when they tell this story? What are people's impulses upon hearing the story? Are people saying what's on their mind, or are they holding back, and why? Right. Or, between two members. It seems like you two are kind of talking about how you're similar, but I wondered if more aliveness would come or more growth would come if you talk about how you're different in some way. And then a whole variety of group as a whole interventions that you can pull out is it seems like we're kind of moving slow and stagnant. Can you help me understand why? Like, this would be kind of very general. And then people might disagree with you, or they might say why, or they'll say that's a dumb thing you said, and I want to go back to this. But you're going back to kind of the point of this little talk, which is you try to help the members talk, help them talk to one another, and then help them ideally talk about new things in new ways with new depth. Okay, let me stop there. Bye-bye.